Restriction after a weight loss procedure. What does that mean? What does it feel like? And why is the word restriction actually the enemy of weight loss success? Let's find out. So there are many misconceptions surrounding the word restriction. And here at True You Weight Loss, we kind of view the word as a bad word. It's a word we don't like to use. So why is that? Well, let's first consider how you feel full in general. In its simplest sense, you might think that, okay, we eat, food goes down into the stomach fills up, brain registers fullness, and we stop eating. Simple process, right? So if we make the stomach smaller with a weight loss procedure, then we can eat less, feel full, and eat smaller portions. Pretty simple as well. But unfortunately, that's not exactly true. First of all, the stomach is stretchy. Whether it's a normal stomach or a stomach surgically altered with sutures or staples, the stomach has the ability to stretch, always. It's not a rigid, fixed box that can only hold a specific amount. It's actually more of a stretchy, saggy bag, and it can always stretch out. So that means you can always eat beyond your capacity if you don't recognize when you're full. And we've all experienced this. You're eating out at a restaurant, you enjoy your entree, you feel pretty stuffed, but dessert comes out and you say, I could probably eat a few more bites. And at that point you say, all right, now I'm really full. Okay, that's capacity. And many people will view that as restriction. I've reached restriction. And they're seeking that same feeling with their weight loss procedure. And we have to be very careful with this. How does your brain actually register fullness? It's actually a really complex process. So first of all, as the stomach stretches with food, the vagus nerve sends signals to your brain. That's one of the initial steps. But there's a lot more involved. Simultaneous to this happening, the food in your stomach is actually interacting with your stomach lining. It's exiting your stomach and interacting with your small intestine. And that triggers other events to happen. It triggers hormones to be released. It triggers digestive enzymes to be released. And then these factors, either directly or indirectly, also let your brain know that you're full. But this takes some time. And if we don't allow our system the time to register this fullness, we'll end up overeating. So again, relying on stretch or discomfort to alert us to stop eating is essentially a guarantee that you will overeat. So ultimately, you have to give the system time. It actually takes many minutes for this process to occur. And we've all experienced this as well. If you're out to dinner, maybe with friends or family, you've ordered several dishes, you end up eating them and you say, gosh, we should order another one of these. But maybe it takes 15 minutes to come out. And at that point you say, I'm actually not hungry. So what's happened here is you've given your system time to register that you're full. And this is critically important whether you've had a weight loss procedure or not. We must give the system time to register fullness rather than relying on that feeling of intense fullness or restriction, because that's problematic. And part of the problem is that over the years, all of us have tuned out those early feelings of fullness. And so the signals between our stomach and our brain have become less reliable. So let's dive into a few key points that can help us properly address fullness, properly portion our meals, and learn to retrain our overall behavior. So point number one, the stomach is not a fixed structure, and fullness actually is a complex process. It takes time and it takes awareness. This is why it's essential and why we strongly encourage that you eat slowly and mindfully at every meal and every snack. Point number two, we cannot rely on our stomachs to properly tell us when we're full. Let's face it, your stomach has let you down over the years. The lines of communication between your stomach and your brain have been largely severed. Over time, your brain has tuned out the signals from your stomach and vice versa, and ultimately communication is very poor. They aren't talking to each other. So we cannot trust that the signals that we're feeling are accurate, and we can't rely on them. Even a surgically altered stomach will not properly convey signals of fullness unless we are very careful. So that brings us to point number three, eat to satisfaction, not to fullness. The key point in all of this. We must eat until we're just satisfied, not until we feel fullness, restriction, or discomfort. So it's really important that we measure portions and learn what fullness actually feels like. It shouldn't hurt. You shouldn't be uncomfortable. You shouldn't feel like you cannot take another bite. If you eat slowly enough, you'll soon realize that you're actually satisfied with much smaller portions, and you won't be relying on discomfort to stop you from eating. Trust your dietitian and the recommendations they make in terms of portion sizes, and then follow those recommendations. Measure your food. Be very careful with your portions. Again, if you rely on restriction, fullness, or discomfort, you're actually overeating. Restriction equals overeating, and we need to be very careful with that. In fact, repeatedly eating to the point of restriction over time may lead your new stomach to stretch out. So that carries over into point number four, which is if you've had a weight loss procedure, whether it's a lap band, a gastric balloon, an endoscopic sleeve, a gastric bypass, a vertical sleeve, you need to measure your food, measure your portions at every meal. It's also critically important to track what you eat every day, because you really can't rely on visual cues to estimate how much you're eating or what your actual macros are. We need to measure and we need to track. And the final point, point number 5, it is essential throughout this process to relearn what full actually feels like. So if we measure, track, and eat mindfully and slowly, over time, we can actually change our overall behavior. We can actually retrain the communication between our stomachs and our brains so it's somewhat more effective. So then what does fullness feel like? What cues can we rely on? So we need to look for the earliest cues of fullness. This can be something very minor. The earliest sign might be a burp or two, a hiccup, a very slight sense of pressure. Learn these cues. Learn from these cues. Recognize them, embrace them, listen to your body. We must retrain our system over time so that we can have long-term benefit from a weight loss procedure. So ultimately, forget about restriction. It's misleading. It's frankly a setup for disaster to rely on it. And if you think a weight loss procedure can physically stop you from eating, well, it can. Well, maybe at first, but over time, relying on a procedure rather than a lifestyle change will ultimately lead to failure. So let's not focus on restriction. Let's focus on being satisfied, on being happy with smaller portions, on being content with improving our health, our habits, and our overall quality of life. I hope this video was helpful, and for more information on endoscopic weight loss procedures and weight loss in general, you can visit our website at trueyouweightloss.com.